Hello, I'm Evan with New Life for Old Bikes. In this episode, we're going to straighten out the front wheel on our 1970s road bike project. We're also going to straighten out the wheel on a 1980s mountain bike. Stick with me and find out how. This is the front wheel on my 1976 Huffy Independence. I want you to pay close attention to the gap between the brake and the wheel right here. As I turn it, the gap closes up and it rubs the wheel right there. We're going to go ahead and fix this today. In order to do this job, you'll either need a spoke wrench or a screwdriver. I have 3 different types of spoke wrenches right here. All 3 of them do the same job, but the one on the far left has multiple sizes available. If you decide to use a screwdriver, the tire will have to be removed from the wheel. If you decide to use a spoke wrench, the tire can remain installed. If you've gone through the trouble to remove the tire from the rim, make sure to lubricate each spoke with a little bit of penetrating oil. This process can be done in a wheel truing stand, or in our case, we're going to do this right on the bike. I'm leaving the front wheel in the fork to do the job, but if you're working on a back wheel, you could just as easily leave that in the frame to do the job. In order to tighten a spoke, you put the spoke wrench over the spoke, and then you're going to turn it clockwise or to the right to increase the tension. You're going to turn it counterclockwise or left to decrease the tension. I'm going to start just prior to the bend and tighten the spoke just a little bit. Then I'm going to continue to the next spoke and tighten that a little bit. I'm going to continue this until I get just past where it's bent. How about that? Looks much closer already. The next thing I'm going to do is tighten the front caliper. The reason I'm doing that is I'll be able to do a finer adjustment with the brake pads closer to the rim. Once we've tightened our brake caliper down, we're going to turn the wheel to see where it's hitting next. And we're going to tighten the spoke opposite. Notice it's hitting. I'm going to pull it that direction. That looks fantastic. Please notice it still has a very slight wobble in it. However, it would be perfectly usable at this point. I'm somewhat of a perfectionist, and I'm going to try to get a little bit more of that wobble out. All right, that one is now coming too close to this side, so I'm going to tighten the spokes on the opposite side of the wheel. And this should be pretty close at this point. That looks pretty darn good. I'm very pleased with how true the wheel is at this point. Once I've finished this, the last thing I'm going to do is make sure all my spokes are tight. That doesn't mean I'm going to crank down on them, it just means I'm going to snug them up. I'll start at the valve, that way it's easy to remember where I started and stopped. And I'm just going to go around and make sure they're all snug. Once I've snugged all the spokes, give the wheel one last spin and make sure that we didn't throw it off at all. Wow, that looks really good. The last thing we're going to worry about is whether or not the wheel is round. If the wheel were out of round, and let's say this side of the wheel was higher than the other side, we would tighten up each spoke on this side of the wheel, probably about half a turn. Then we would spin the wheel to the other side, and we would loosen each spoke by half a turn. And then we would spin the wheel and see how well we did. This is a procedure that takes quite a bit of time. This is my early 80s mountain bike, and I want you to notice the gap between the straight edge and the wheel. It's consistent till we get here. There's a bow in it. There's a couple of them. This particular bike has probably been curbed. Fortunately, the wheel on this bike is made of steel and I can straighten it. And we're going to learn how to do that today. If this wheel had been aluminum, it would be a loss. The wheel would actually crack when we tried to straighten it. Straightening the sidewall on the wheel will be easier if we remove the wheel from the bike. The first thing we're going to do is release the air pressure from the tire. I'm just pressing in the valve. This will make the tire go through the calipers a whole lot easier. The next thing we're going to do is loosen the wheel. This particular wheel takes a 13mm wrench, but you could easily use a crescent wrench to do this job as well. And if you have V-brakes, simply release the cable from the brake. All right, there we go. If it's the back wheel on your bike that's bent, the first thing to do is shift your bike to its lowest gear. The next thing you're going to do is release the air pressure from the tire. Then you want to loosen the bolts on the back wheel. If you have a quick release, simply release that quick release. Then pull your derailleur back and drop the wheel out of the frame. The next thing I'm going to do is remove the tire from the wheel. If you need more detail or explanation on this, see my video on changing tires. Before I start straightening this wheel, I wanted you to see just how badly bent this was. Now remember, I can straighten this out because this is steel, not aluminum. If this was an aluminum wheel, I would crack it trying to straighten it. The next thing I'm going to do is take a couple of pieces of wood that I've cut to the right size and put them on either side of the dent. I'm going to clamp them in place with a pair of vice grips. I'm not going to clamp them real tight, just snug. My only purpose is to hold the piece of wood in place. Next, I'm going to take a pair of channel locks. You can use any kind of pliers or a crescent wrench for this, and you're going to bend the wheel. The only purpose for those pieces of wood is so that I don't damage the wheel while I'm doing this process. I'm going to continue around the wheel and straighten out the rest of it and show you what it looks like when I'm done. Unfortunately, this is a rather slow procedure, but I wanted you to see what was possible. I've marked on the wheel where the dent was, and if I turn the wheel up and put a straight edge against it, you'll notice that the wheel is now straight. The gap is even all the way around. I'm going to do the other side now, because as you can see, it has a real good dent in it right there. After working on this for about an hour, I believe I got it pretty straight. It's not perfect, but I can get the brakes just where they need to be. My next step is simply going to be to clean up the wheel with a little steel wool and wax and reinstall the tire and tube. Once I've cleaned the wheel to my satisfaction, I'm going to go ahead and install the tire. Again, I do have a video on changing tires if you're not familiar with the process. The narrower tires are a little harder to get through the hole here, but not too bad. There we go. There we go. Now we just need to make sure the valve is seated. This particular tire does not have directional tread, so it doesn't matter which way it goes. I do want you to notice I did not add any air pressure to it yet. This is so I can sneak it past the brake pads. Make sure your wheel is centered before you snug up the bolts. What an improvement. The last thing I'm going to do is put the air pressure back in the tire. I'm going to check and make sure that the bead is well seated. I don't want the tire popping out of the wheel. Once I'm certain it's okay, I'm going to pump it up to full pressure. There we go. Very good. And one air cap. Once you've installed the wheel, If you have V-brakes, now would be the time to hook them back up. If you have any questions about this video, please let me know in the comments below. And don't forget, like and subscribe.